Well, welcome to today's episode of HIPcast. Today we're going to go a little bit global. We are going to dive into learning about IFHIMA, or the International Federation of Health Information Management Associations. And we have with us today an incredible guest, Lorraine Fernandes, who has been involved with IFHIMA for quite a long time in some various roles. So welcome, Lorraine. We're glad you're here.
Thank you. I appreciate the invite.
Absolutely. So I'm going to read your bio, Lorraine. Lorraine Fernandes is an accomplished author, a respected public speaker on topics related to the role of technology and data in healthcare transformation. She has been at the vanguard of thought leadership in advancing information, data governance, and data exchange from a healthcare organizational and jurisdictional perspective. She has expertise in patient, consumer, person, provider, and citizen identification related to the citizen-centric services, population health, electronic health records, and customer satisfaction. Lorraine served as president of the International Federation of Health Information Management Associations from 2019 to 2022, and continues to serve on its board as the Marketing and Communication Chair. During her tenure as IFHIMA president, Lorraine was instrumental in expanding the global diversity of the membership to include 56 countries. Kudos, Lorraine. She launched the Federation's social media outreach, orchestrated the revamp of the website, and served as its global news editor. Lorraine has co-authored and edited many IFHIMA white papers addressing certification, workforce, ICD-11, governance, and privacy. She is a recipient of the American Health Information Management Association's 2013 Pioneer Award, and also the 1998 Discovery Award, and California HIMA's 2002 Distinguished Member Award. Again, welcome so much to the show. I'm so eager to get to learn more about IFHIMA.
Thanks.
So we always like to ask our guests a fun question, because this profession is a journey, and your journey has taken you quite a few places around the world. So I'm curious about your journey. So tell us about Lorraine and how you ended up in this crazy thing that we call health information.
Oh, you are so right, Seth. Talk about a crazy journey. I grew up in very rural America in South Dakota. I went to school to be a medical secretary in 1973 to 75. Takes you back quite a ways, I'm sure, for the listeners. And my first job was at Day County Hospital in Webster, South Dakota, where I was the second employee. We had a director and me, and I did coding, transcription, data analysis, you name it, I did it, because I had the most fabulous mentor, Olive Grimsrud, who opened the door to everything for me and then said, Lorraine, the bird needs to fly.
Oh.
So went back to school twice, actually, after that. And I think we all start our career, if not the first job, the second job, with fabulous mentors who just open the door and hope you fly away and soar.
Yeah,
Yes.
South Dakota is definitely a great place to soar. That's a lot of big sky country when you get into that part of the world.
Big sky country. And so kind of from that, I checkerboarded across the U.S., went to school in South Dakota, La Crosse, Wisconsin, worked in Huntington, West Virginia, Seth, as you and I talked about before the podcast. And then I went west to Northern California and worked there for, almost 35 years, I think it was, 35. And then I now worked as a director, an executive director at hospitals. And then I went to working business aspect of, sales and marketing and consulting services for a couple of consulting groups, ended up working for software companies and did, sales marketing again there, as well as some service delivery. And then I now live in Northwest Montana. I overlook Flathead Lake. I'm 45 minutes from the West Gate to Glacier National Park. And I'm retired other than my work for IFHIMA, which we call the Federation. So Shannan, you can shorten it to the Federation because, oh my God,
Federation.
the Federation. Yeah. And, I'm very busy doing, the marketing, the communications, and other aspects of my board responsibilities. And my term will end in 2025.
2025. So when did you start moving outside from a focus perspective of the U.S. into a global role? Is it when you went into the marketing and sales positions with the technology companies?
Yes, and that was a good conclusion to draw. The software company I worked for I started there in 1998. I had to think for a second there. We did work in Canada, and we provided the software that does disambiguation. It was a software that allowed you to say, okay, Lorraine Fernandes with this demographic, Lorraine Fernandes with this demographic, Lorraine Grunwald with this demographic. I am in fact the same person based upon the likelihood ratio software that we used to do that. So we worked in states in the US and specific hospital systems. I worked with all the provinces with the exception of Quebec in Canada. And then after that, really worked in Western Pacific nations like Australia, China, the Philippines, Japan. I primarily did work in the Western Pacific Rim, but I did do some support work in Europe also. So the door opened, I soared a little higher and had fabulous opportunities and exposure to what the world has to offer to all of us in terms of health information.
Oh, that's so exciting. Seth, that was a great conclusion to draw. That her global kind of, I guess, experience started with that sales from that software.
Well, my career's kind of followed a similar
I
path.
see that. Yeah, I see how you ask it.
Yeah, because that's kind of what I've done is go from the hospital side from an HIM perspective into IT, and then now working for a technology company, moved into a global role to where I'm doing the same thing. Started in Canada, then I went to I did a lot of work in Europe, and then down into Asia now. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm kind of following your footsteps.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So, Lorraine, I just want to say how much I love your state. Being in rural Tennessee and growing up on a farm, I'm also a rural person. You said that before we started that you're a rural, you live rurally. Seth and I both do, but I love Montana. It has a piece of my heart. And in fact, I'll be visiting soon for my annual trip to the ranch. So we go out to Paradise Valley every year, and it is stunning there. So I love your state. It's my second favorite in the nation. So I have to say I have a bit of a love affair with the big skies of Montana. So so tell us, tell us a little bit about the Federation. Tell us about some of the background and your work with the Federation.
So I officially joined the board in the Federation in 2013 when our Congress was in Montreal. I had known of the Federation probably at least a decade before that. And I'd say my first exposure to the Federation was with my dear friend Lorraine Nicholson, who lives in Manchester in the UK. She happened to work as a consultant for the software company I was working for then. And the other way I got introduced to the Federation was my good friend Margaret Skirka. So Margaret was chair of the board of the Federation from I have to think here a second, my years now, 2010 to 2013. So when I joined the board of the Federation, Margaret was in the role as a past president of the Federation. And the other one who, back, say, 2005, 2008, that introduced me to the Federation was Linda Claus. So, obviously, high recognition, both those names. Oh my gosh. And such great people to open doors, to mentor you to new opportunities, and work with throughout my years initially on the board anyway. So I joined the board in 2013, as I said, because the role of the American director, which was held by Margaret Skirka, and the role of the regional director for the Americas, because in the Federation, we're divided just like WHO is to 6 regions. So there's regional directors for each of the 6 WHO regions. So the regional director for the Americas was open. Margaret encouraged me to go through the process that IFHIMA had at that point in time, and they still follow this process, to apply to be the Americas, IFHIMA's rep to the board, actually IFHIMA's rep, and then you got elected through the board to a competitive process. So I went through the IFHIMA process. It was, I think it was probably, I heard anecdotally, a very competitive process because there were a lot of people who wanted to serve in that role. A lot of Americans who had, international exposure, international work experience. It was amazing, what I learned just in that process. So got elected, got appointed, ran for the Americas seat, was elected. And then I got, to work with Margaret directly as the past president. Angelika Handel was the president. She is from Germany, and I happen to have German heritage. So we had great fun, talking about that. And then it's kind of, the classic off to the races of going from the regional director for my first term, and we have 3-year terms at IFHIMA. Going from that role at the end of my term, I then became the global news editor, served in that role during my 2016 to 2019 term, and then found the great volunteer Dilhari de Alameda. Hey, let's get it right. Dilhari de Alameda from the University of Pittsburgh, who took over as global news editor, did a fabulous job. I was then elected as president-elect 16 to 19, and then president from 19 to 22. And oh, what fun we had being a virtual organization during the pandemic. So whether you were somebody who was, went to an office every day, or where you were virtual all the time, the pandemic obviously changed the world upside down.
That it did. And I noticed in the notes that we have, there's a fun story about losing a passport. That's a biggest fear of mine with being in an international role. And I do the same thing where I'm traveling all over, and I do the standard man thing to where I tap my pocket every 10 minutes to make sure that my wallet's still there. Wallet, phone. But I'm curious about this story because I saw it in the notes and I thought, well, that sounds like a fun one.
Oh, yeah. This was actually when I was working for IBM, probably about, let's say it was about 2014, I'm going to guess. And I traveled to Beijing, which was very common for me. It went at least once a year. And I had my passport in my work carry-on where I kept, all my documents, I had my phone on me, but, and I put it up above because the seats were full, and it was one of the few times I got to the airport late. I normally am an early bird, and I put my bag up above me, and did my work, got good snooze in before I got to Beijing. And, people began to deport. I did not notice, don't ask me why, I have no idea, that a lady a row or two in front of me grabbed my black, we all had black business bags, and departed, 5 minutes, 10 minutes ahead of me for whatever reason. I got ready to get out of my seat, get up, and looked around, and my business bag wasn't there. Where my passport was. And so you look front, you look back, you look under, you ask around. I got the flight attendant. I said, my bag's not here. So then I had to wait for everybody to deplane, talked with the flight attendant, and it wasn't there. That was quite obvious. So the conclusion was the lady who was a few rows in front of me, she had taken my bag instead of hers. We knew her name. She had medications in her bag. And we read the labels on it. I ended up sitting for over 2 hours in the deplaning area and praying that lady would answer the overhead calls. And it took over 2 hours because it took a long time to get her to answer the call. I figured, the worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to put me on the next flight back to San Francisco. And finally they got her, and getting the bag from luggage back to me and vice versa, it was about 2.5 hours.
Wow.
And of course, your phone's running out of battery then. You don't have your charger. And then you just continue to think on and on. So, moral of the story is never let the passport out of your sight.
Yes.
So anytime I travel internationally, I have a specific type of pant that I wear that has a zipper pocket. And my passport, my wife's passport, my kids' passports are in that zipper pocket.
Yes.
And I touch that pocket way too much because I've got to make sure that I have that passport.
Yes.
So I saw that in the story, or in the notes, and I appreciate you telling that story. It's kind of a side thing, but it is part of the global challenges that you deal with when you expand out and you're traveling internationally. It's all those little things that you have to figure out. And, you're in the UK eating beans and toast, and you're like, well, I can make this work, but it's not necessarily gravy and biscuits, but it'll do.
And then you adapt to, the different cultures. They drive differently. Their sense of safety and well-being is different than you and I as Americans. And, I've had a few episodes where I gave myself up for dead with, foreign taxi drivers, foreign Uber drivers, etc. But you just learn to breathe deeply and know this moment shall pass.
That's right. Well, tell us about the Federation's priorities, their mission, vision, those type things, some of the activities that do support those priorities.
So we have a strategic plan, as any organization does, and we have pillars within that plan. So I happen to own or drive the foundation. So we have 3 strategic pillars. The membership engagement and growth, which is led by Guillermo Paluzzi in Barcelona. I love working with Guillermo, and his wife Leo travels with him sometimes, and she's fabulous too. Then we have the education, training, and research, and that is led by Patience Abue from Maryland, from the Baltimore area now. And then we have strategic partnerships, which would include WHO, obviously. And the chair for that pillar is right now in the process of being reappointed. And then we have the foundation, which is, the pillars sit on. So I lead the foundation, and we own, the technology infrastructure, the marketing, the communication, revenue growth. We're obviously, as a foundation, focused on revenue growth. And then we interact a lot with the other pillars to ensure the foundation is supporting them. And I'll give you an example. We will now procure licenses to have our own Microsoft 360 Teams account and all of the others apps that go with 360 so that we can provide better service to our volunteers, to our board members, and to our members. So there will be significant changes coming by I'd say late fall. I thank Julie Persley and Melanie Endicott-Kiss for the volunteer work they're doing in leading that specific project. And then we'll work as the foundation with the education, training, and research and Patience and her team, because we're going to put on a 3-part educational series in early 2025 that's going to focus on workforce, ICD-11, and the HIM profession of the future. So we'll collaborate with the ETR, the Education, Training, and Research, in soliciting speakers. And that solicitation will go out if Lorraine gets her work done by the end of the year. I got to do some website work with our webmaster and with our project manager to do that. So I'm real excited about that. But the board work is very active. It's absolutely a working board. Particularly Marcy she lives outside Toronto. She is the membership chair and has been for the last, I think it's 6 years now, or going on 6. I think it's 5 now. She's done a lot of revamping for membership chair to ensure we serve our members well and communicate. And our members are corporate, individual, nations, and educational institution. So we have some different membership categories. And then last but certainly not least is what is now called the regional island networks. We did that because there are islands, and particularly in the South Pacific, who have a loose federation, independent nations. Many of them belong to the Commonwealth or the French or whatever major nation. And so we did that category. That may undergo some tweaks in the future now as the board talks about constitutional changes for the next term. But we've tried to find ways to draw people in, whether that's any of those 5 categories, to serve our members better, to recognize the diversity, because, what's a priority for the PHIN, the Pacific Health Information Network in the South Pacific, is very different than the US or Canada, or perhaps the UK and the IRHIM organization in the UK. But we find the common denominator and firmly believe that, raise the tide, raise the boat, that kind of slogan. If we help our low and lower middle income countries, which is really a focus of ours, we help global health. We help the professions. We help the confidentiality and privacy and security of all our global citizens' information. And it's amazing, despite the diversity, the commonality that you find when you start that good conversation.
That's awesome. So I'm picking up on a couple of things that you said. One of them being, first of all, I love that there are multiple levels of engagement here. You can be a member in multiple ways. That's really interesting. And for our listeners, maybe one thing to ask for them specifically is, if you join as an individual, do you have an opportunity as an individual to volunteer and serve? So that's one question. The second is, would you talk a little bit about how you drive revenue?
Okay. So absolutely, to volunteer and serve on any of our 3 strategic pillars or the foundation, or to be a leader in our communities of practice. And the communities of practice is something that is new to IFHIMA. We're about a year and a half into that. That was a priority for Vicki Bennett. She lives in Canberra and she's the president of the board now. So we have 3 communities of practice that are led by, they have a chair of the community, they have a secretariat, and then a co-leader or a co-secretariat. It's up to the chair to decide their support structure. So participating in any of those requires that you be a member in any of our categories. So how we get to 56 nations, we only have 22 member nations right now. I think that counts 22 today. But, it's those half a dozen educational institutions, those half a dozen corporate members, and then we have several hundred individuals. And those numbers may not sound like much, but they cross 56 nations, the entire WHO regions. And the reach is very large when you consider some nations have, like AHIMA does, obviously, 100,000 members. Other national members only have 25 or 2,500. But those 56 nations really represent our global diversity and our global priorities.
Very nice, very nice. And so, what are the ways that you drive revenue for IFHIMA? Membership probably being one of those, but what other opportunities are there?
So membership is a key one, and historically that was the only way we drove revenue. I have a wonderful foundation group who works with me. I tell the board all the time, they're the best volunteer group I think there is in IFHIMA, and the best one I've ever worked, because they have two laser focuses, and one is how you increase IFHIMA's revenue so we can serve everybody better. So we have the corporate members there, and we give tremendous benefits. Some would say we gave away the store to our corporate members, but that's okay. It was for the greater good. We have revenue from those educational institutions and a lot of perks that go to the educational institutions also. For example, we've done to our educational institution members kind of a call for a couple of students who would own a toolkit we're going to develop. And I think it'll be a great example of a couple of students developing the various collateral for toolkits, PowerPoints, podcasts, position statements. It's going to be a very heavy lift to do all of this toolkits. So we're hoping one of our educational institution members has students who really want to do some heavy lifting to help us and give them great opportunities in their career. Probably will be a capstone type project, even for a couple of them, because this is not a 50-hour project by any means. In order to get the diversity of products and outcomes we want from that. So the other way we drive revenue is this 3-part educational series we'll do next year. We will be looking for corporate sponsors for that. In fact, I have a call this afternoon with someone about that to set, what are the benefits as a corporate sponsor for those that you're going to get. And therefore, we will set our fees for sponsorship for this 3-part series. And we're always looking for alternative ways to drive revenue. But we have a fine balance, like most small volunteer associations have. How do you drive revenue? You drive membership growth, you drive opportunities for volunteers, and give value to those sponsors in the various categories, and yet be unbiased and very ethical about how you execute things. And I'm sure you guys, you do this every day. I'm retired and just a half-time volunteer for IFHIMA, it seems like most days. So seeking that fine balance obviously is defined by our code of ethics, our confidentiality, and we always ask ourselves, do we have a conflict of interest?
Very cool. Very cool.
Sounds great.
Tell
Go ahead,
us
Jenny.
a little bit. I was just going to ask, tell us a little bit about the maybe some global news in the triennial Congress.
Oh, so global news right now is published by the group that works for Vicki Bennett at the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare. She's got some crackpot younger consultants who worked for her. I think we can all maybe remember those days in our career. And so 3 times a year, they produce global news. We released one last week. So for any listener, please make sure you go to IFHIMA.org, go to our website. You'll see the latest global news there, as well as the historical issues we have. And the editor for global news or the co-editors are appointed by the president. So that's why during my term, it was Dilhari de Alameda, and she served during part of Marcy's term as well as I did. So it's a great opportunity to get involved. We really work hard every issue to get a diversity of global perspectives represented. And there'll be a new opportunity if anybody wants to be editor or co-editor to reach out to Denise Marshall from Barbados, who's our president-elect, because she will appoint the next global news editor and the team that does that. You talked, let's see, what was your other question, Shannan?
Triennial Congress.
Triennial Congress. Okay. Well, for anyone who's listening who went to Brisbane, you'll say, wow, what a great Congress. And it absolutely was. We had it was a little under 600 attendees. Usually the host nation, the majority of the attendees come from the host nation. That was true. But we had 32 nations represented. Not all of them were member nations in our attendees there. We had attendees from the likes of Nepal and Bangladesh and Malawi and, obviously the US, obviously Australia, the Philippines, Indonesia, India. And that kind of diversity is always represented at the Congress. It is held every 3 years. We will hold the next one in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. That's the plans in November of 2025. That's about all I can tell you at this point in time. They are still very much in the beginning stages of organizing exactly where it's going to be held, the website, the call for abstracts, and all those things. We are encouraging them to move at the speed of Western cultures because that's one of the things you learn. And I'm sure you can both appreciate it. The cultural differences can be vast. You have to respect all of those. And we in the U.S. are probably not so many people consider us. When we take a vacation, do we really take a vacation?
Right. No.
And work hours and things like that. So they're moving forward. I love their organizing committee, the way it's looking like now from around the globe. So stay tuned. In a few months, we should have more details to share.
Great. Well, as we come around the corner here on the end of our podcast, I do want to ask, what do you see for the future of the Federation?
So we'll continue to work with WHO in our NGO role. Our primary work with WHO is around what's called HIPcast, the Family of International Classifications. So IC will continue to work with there's about half a dozen work groups in HIPcast. We've got representation on all of those now from various individual members or members from our nation around the world. ICD-11, data interoperability, data exchange, harmonization, across ICD-11, SNOMED, and all the other classifications that there are out there will be a key priority. IC will outreach more to other parts of WHO, their digital transformation, their artificial intelligence, and other parts of WHO that are equally important to our profession. Certainly member growth will be important to IFHIMA, and we'll continue to strive to do that. Increase revenue, because the more revenue we have, obviously the more initiatives we can take on, and we can invest in our membership and the growth of the Federation so that we can continue the great things that the likes of Margaret Skirka, and I have to give a shout out to Carol Lewis. What a fabulous early on. And Rita Finnegan. Those two ladies moved heaven and earth in the early days of IFHIMA, along with the Lorraine Nicholsons and the Phyllis Watsons, and all of those from Canada, the UK, Germany, Australia, etc. So I think the future is good. We have a well-rounded board now who is very engaged, and I'm really excited about what we're going to take on, how we're going to perhaps engage and execute educational events more than what we have in the past, because we've got a stronger foundation from which to do that.
That's awesome. Well, so for all of our listeners, if you are fascinated by this discussion of global health information management associations and trying to understand the footprint of our profession on the world and not just our own nation, go to ifhima.org. You can become a member. You can keep up with the news. There's probably some ways to subscribe to some information where you get emails. Okay. And so, if you want to keep growing and expanding and you want to, you feel like stretching into a place of very much unknown for you if you're not a global traveler, ifhima.org is a great place to do it. Lorraine, thank you so much for sharing all that your years of experience with IFHIMA. Wow. It's really, I'm just going to say, really cool. This is a cool conversation.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the inspiration. And Shannan, until next time, my friend.
See you next time, buddy.